I like exploring the old world, most specifically the ancient temples. From all those I visited, there is this one particular ancient temple that stood out, but in a terrifying way. This is my story. I remember the first glimpse of the temple as I trekked through the dense jungle, its towering stone spires, choked by the relentless grip of ancient vines, clawed at the stormy skies above. A foreboding silence loomed as I approached, as if the jungle itself held its breath in reverence or fear. The air grew colder as I stepped through the gaping maw of the temple's entrance, a portal carved with the visages of deities long forgotten by man. Their eyes, hollow and deep, seemed to follow me, watching with an eerie intent as I ventured into the shadowy embrace of the inner sanctum. Each step echoed through the vast hallways, the sound bouncing off the high walls adorned with intricate hieroglyphs. I traced my fingers across them, feeling the chill of the stone seep into my flesh. The carvings depicted scenes of life and death, of a civilization that thrived on rituals mysterious and unfathomable. As I ventured deeper, the light from the entrance dimmed, swallowed by the oppressive darkness of the temple. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam a feeble attempt to pierce the all-consuming black. It danced over the outlines of massive columns, each one etched with wearisome detail, standing as sentinels guarding the path to the central chamber. The central chamber. I felt its pull, an inexplicable urge that guided my feet forward. My heartbeat quickened with every step, a rhythmic drumming that seemed to harmonize with a low hum that emanated from the bowels of the temple. It was as if the very stones were chanting in anticipation. I found the chamber adorned with a lone altar in its center. The altar, a slab of obsidian, reflected no light, absorbing the beam of my flashlight as if it were a void. Upon it lay scattered offerings, brittle bones, dulled jewels, and withered flowers, tributes to an entity unknown. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest with an almost tangible force. I struggled to breathe, my lungs constricted by the weight of the unseen. The hum grew louder, now a cacophony that filled the chamber, vibrating through the very ground beneath my feet. And then I saw it. In the farthest corner of the chamber stood a statue, its form obscured by the shadows. I approached, my body moving of its own volition, my mind screaming to flee, yet my legs carried me closer. The statue depicted a deity neither benevolent nor malevolent, its features an amalgamation of man and beast, a visage that defied sanity. I stood before it, feeling its gaze upon me, though it had no eyes to see. The hum crescendoed into a deafening roar, and the temple seemed to come alive. The walls pulsated, the hieroglyphs bleeding shadows that pooled on the floor and writhed like serpents at my feet. In a trance, I reached out to touch the statue, my hand trembling. The stone was impossibly warm, the texture like that of skin. I recoiled in horror, but not before the statue's jaw unhinged, gaping in a silent scream that threatened to shatter my soul. The ground shook violently, throwing me to my knees. Dust cascaded from above as the temple protested with groans and shrieks, the sound of 1,000 voices trapped within the stone. I scrambled backward, my eyes never leaving the statue. It remained still, its scream eternal and silent. I had to escape. My mind clawed back control and I turned to flee, but the chamber had changed. The exit was gone, replaced by an unending corridor that stretched into darkness. I ran, my footsteps thundering in my ears, the hum now a mocking laugh that followed me. The flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw them, figures lining the corridor, their outlines barely discernible. Were they statues or something else? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to know. I ran until my breath was ragged, until my legs ached with fire. The corridor never ended, the figures always just out of sight, but I felt their eyes on me, heard the whisper of their movements. Then, light. A dull blue glow emanated from ahead. Not the warm, welcoming light of day, but the cold, sterile light of the deep sea. It beckoned me, and I stumbled toward it, drawn by the promise of an end to this nightmare. The blue light grew into an orb, floating in the center of the corridor. It pulsed in time with the hum, now a soft lullaby that soothed my ragged senses. I reached out to it, my hand mere inches away when it burst into a blinding flare. When my vision cleared, I was outside. The temple loomed behind me, its entrance sealed with stone as if it had never been open. The jungle had reclaimed its terrain, the sounds of life returning with fervor. Birds sang, insects chirped, and the wind whispered through the leaves. But the silence was gone, replaced with the faintest hum that lingered in the back of my mind. I looked at my hands. They were empty, but they ached with a memory of warmth, a touch of something ancient and alive. I can't explain what happened in the temple, and I have no evidence of it but the haunting hum that never ceases. The jungle around me is alive, yet I feel the gaze of the temple upon me, its secrets locked within. I walk away, each step heavy with the knowledge that something within that temple knows me now. And somewhere in the dark recesses of my thoughts, a voiceless whisper promises, or threatens, that one day I will return. Despite the dread that clung to me from that first visit, I found myself standing before the temple once more. The jungle, thick and relentless, had tried to dissuade me with its tangled embrace. But here I was, facing the ancient stone once again. The air was heavy with a silence that seemed to seep from the very pores of the temple walls. I pushed against the stone that sealed the entrance last time, half expecting it to remain immovable. A final denial of the mysteries that lay within. To my surprise, it gave way with a grinding lament, opening just enough to allow my passage. I should have taken that reluctant groan as a warning, but my curiosity was a force greater than any caution. The darkness greeted me like an old, unwelcome friend. My flashlight, a meager beacon, cut through it, revealing the familiar hieroglyphs that had haunted my waking thoughts. They seemed to writhe under the beam, an illusion so potent I had to look away. With each step deeper into the temple's maw, I could feel the air grow denser, as if I was walking underwater. The pressure built against my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs in shallow gasps. Yet I moved forward, driven by an insatiable need to understand. The central chamber loomed ahead, the obsidian altar catching what little light there was, casting distorted shadows that played along the walls. The statue stood as before, its silent scream more disturbing than any sound. The hum was there too, a low vibration against my skull. It seemed to be waiting for me, a welcome back to its eldritch embrace. I approached the altar, my eyes scanning the offerings. They were different from before, fresher. The bones still carried vestiges of life, the flowers not yet fully wilted. Someone, or something, had been here after me, tending to a ritual centuries in the making. My hand hovered over the stone, recalling the warmth I had felt before. This time it was cold, so deeply cold it burned the flesh. I jerked back, cradling my hand to my chest, my heart thundering against my ribs. The chamber began to change as I watched, the walls inching closer with every thump of my heart. The space was alive, breathing in time with the hum, contracting and expanding. Panic took hold, a vice upon my senses. I turned to leave, but the corridor was gone, replaced by a labyrinth of new passageways. Each entry looked the same, yet I felt drawn to one on the far left. It was as if a whisper echoed down that hall, beckoning me. With trepidation etched into every step, I followed the call, my flashlight's beam a feeble guardian against the creeping dark. The passage narrowed as I advanced, forcing me to move sideways. The walls brushed my shoulders, their touch cold and somehow sorrowful. I pushed on until the passage opened into a small room, its purpose unclear, empty save for a single pedestal in the center. Atop the pedestal sat an artifact, a small stone figure carved with meticulous care. It depicted no god I knew, a strange, twisted form that seemed to change shape from every angle I viewed it. I circled the pedestal, the figure never looking the same twice. It was mesmerizing, captivating, a puzzle demanding to be solved. The hum intensified, vibrating through the soles of my feet up through my spine. It seemed to emanate from the figure itself, a siren song that resonated with something primal within me. Without thought, I reached out, my fingers brushing the stone. A rush of air escaped from the figure, a sigh of relief or perhaps resignation. The room spun, the walls blurring into a vortex that swallowed everything. The hum became a roar, a cacophony of whispers that filled the room with the voices of 1,000 lost souls. When the spinning stopped, I was no longer in the small room but back in the central chamber. The altar's offerings had changed again, now only ashes and dust. The hum was gone, replaced by a palpable silence that pressed upon my ears with an almost physical force. I turned to the statue, half expecting it to have moved, but it was as it had been, its jaw locked in that eternal, silent scream. But its hands, they were different, positioned as if they had released something they had held tight for centuries. The air stirred, a gentle breeze that shouldn't exist within the confines of stone. It whispered across my skin, carrying a scent I couldn't place, ancient and foreign. The walls, once covered in hieroglyphs, were now blank, as if everything had been a figment of my imagination. I stumbled back to the entrance, the corridor now straight and true. As I emerged into the light, I dared not look back for fear the temple would disappear, leaving me to wonder if it had ever existed. I left the jungle with more questions than answers. The artifact, the hum, the changing offerings, and the statue's altered stance, they spun a riddle that offered no solutions. The temple remained a silent guardian of its own enigma, and I, merely a witness to its ancient, unfathomable truth.